Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some out on the West Coast. My name is Krista Costas Bradstreet. I'm the Director of Policy and Partnerships for the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, or CPRA. Managing all the technical aspects of our webinar today is my colleague, MJ Akonde. So on our behalf, I'd like to welcome you to discuss 5 key strategies for being a future-ready recreation leader as presented by our speaker, Brenda Herchmer. Just quickly before we start, on the next slide, you'll see a screenshot, which is an example of our attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You're listening in likely using your computer's speaker system by default, but if you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Just wanted to let you know as well, you will have an opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter, to Brenda, by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You can send your questions in at any time during the presentation, but we will get to all of the questions and answers at the end of today's presentation. So feel free to type in your questions as they come up, and as I mentioned, we will get to them at the end. We will also be providing this webinar, it's being recorded, it'll be on the CPRA website, and we will be providing the slides as well. So just before I introduce you to Brenda, I want to introduce you to CPRA in case you're not familiar with us. The Canadian Parks and Rec Association is a national organization dedicated to realizing the full potential of parks and recreation as a major contributor to community health and vibrancy. Over its 60-year history, CPRA has been the national voice for parks and recreation, advancing the collective interests of our members. CPRA is a national network dedicated to the well-being of people, communities, and the natural and built environment. And CPRA provides services for our members and partners that cultivate dialogue, learning, and innovation. CPRA's strength comes from the experience, expertise, and network of the staff and board members for our membership, which is the 13 provincial and territorial associations. We work with volunteers, government partners, and a number of allied sectors such as physical activity, sport, education, public health, and others that help us make progress on our goals, and we strive to help them make progress on theirs. We have a virtual office with between 5 and 7 staff, depending on our projects. As the national office of CPRA is located in Ottawa, I pay respect to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. I acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. I pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. As you know, most recently, we've all been dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, and CPRA has tried to be very proactive dealing with it. We have been engaged in weekly calls with our 13 provincial and territorial members to provide regional updates and identify the needs of the sector. We monitor, update, and guide on federal government aid programs. We actively advocate federal government for financial support for the sector. We work with national partners to align our advocacy efforts. We have been sharing information and ideas by way of social media. And we hosted a series of 6 webinars, all of which are available on our website if you're interested looking at reopening of facilities. If there's any other information that we can provide to you, please be sure to reach out and we'll look to see how we can best support you. This summer, we introduced a new tool called The Bench. This is CPRA's new online community, a place for the sector to meet, work, and grow together. We are just today launching a new video about The Bench, which we're going to play for you and hope that there are no glitches. We know the sound is in and out, but it's more background music. So I'll ask MJ to start the video, and then I will introduce you to our speaker. Thanks, MJ. So that is the bench, and as you can see, there are many features of it, from events to discussion groups, a portal for the framework for recreation in Canada, a portal dedicated to Parks for All, and lots of professional development. And it will continue to grow. And one of the ways that we want to continue its growth is to make sure that you're engaged in the bench as well. So we really encourage you to sign up for it. Share the link with your colleagues so that we can help to quickly grow our online community. Because certainly in this case, the more the merrier, and actively participate, post your events, your questions, any resources that you'd like to share. And we think it's going to be a really great tool. And like I said, it's going to continue to grow. So really looking forward to your engagement in that. So I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. Brenda Herchmer is a passionate community builder and the owner of Grassroots Enterprises and a social enterprise called Campus for Communities. A speaker, trainer, and community development coach, she's also an avid blogger and the author of 3 books, including Community Building for Recreation Practitioners. Previously, she's worked for Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, the City of Niagara Falls, and was a recreation professor at Niagara College, where she founded and managed the Niagara Center for Community Leadership. Brenda has been acknowledged as a YWCA Woman of Distinction in Training and Education, and recently won the Brock University Faculty of Applied Sciences Distinguished Graduate Award. So Brenda, thank you so much for your time and expertise today, and I'll hand it over to you, and we'll be back towards the end with some questions for you.
Great. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here and have an opportunity to share what we've learned from other leaders across the country. And to be honest, most of these learnings came from recreation leaders and the work that you are doing. So it's really exciting to be here. I think there's something for me about coming back to my roots because I'm dealing with a lot of other sectors, but to come back to recreation, I feel like clicking my heels and saying there's no place like home, because that's what it feels like. So thank you for that. We're going to get moving. I have a lot of information to share. If I can advance, I might need some help from MJ. For some reason, my slides are not advancing. There we go. And I'll go to the next one. There we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. And we don't have a lot of time, but I do talk quickly, and you are going to get the slides. So don't worry if you miss something. But really what we want to do in this short amount of time is to share some strategies for how you can strengthen the impact of recreation in your community, what it means to be a future-focused recreation leader, and also some inspiring ideas and promising practices and tools that you can use to put the national recreation strategy into place. So we're going to start this with a bit of a poll, and this is really a way of us getting our heads into the idea of being future ready, but also I'm asking you for one word. So I'm asking you to share one word to describe a future-ready recreation leader. And one of the reasons why I do this exercise is because there is research that shows that this will pull both your left brain and your right brain into the conversation. So that's the question. And MJ is also going to make sure that we can all see your answers as well. So we're going to keep that in the chat so we can all continue to review it. But it also gives me a great idea of where you are at. And I'm seeing some great words already: adaptive, resilient, confident, nice, curious, innovative, good, open, yes, all right, knowledgeable, yes, flexible, yes, I always think you have to be like a Gumby, critical thinker, yeah, another flexible, yes, collaborative, okay, we are definitely singing from the same songbook for sure. Thank you, that's awesome. Keep those words coming. They'll stay in the chat and we can keep reviewing them. So thank you for that, that's awesome. Embracing diversity, good one. Wow, okay, we're definitely on the mark with this webinar, good. I think we're talking to people who are on the same page for sure. Can I try to advance these slides again? There we go. So here's where I wanted to start. you know, really, what does the world need now? I mean, I think that's what all of us are really struggling with post-COVID, in terms of what does the world need now? And really what's become very, very clear is that we need strategies for responding to things that are increasingly complicated. So it's individual, social, economical, environmental issues. We need new models of leadership that really help us do more with innovation and systems thinking and foresight. We keep hearing that we need to do so much more in terms of working cross-sectorally and across organizations, more dialogue, more collaboration, more citizen engagement, so that collectively we can make the best use of our resources. So how can we, Recreation and Parks, how can we be part of that solution? And I think, MJ, I'm going to have to get you to advance the slides because this doesn't seem to be cooperating. There we go. So how can we be part of the solution? It's really on us to be more future-focused community leaders. That's really what our task is. So next slide. I think I'll just I was going to just wave at MJ when I need the slides advanced, but my camera is frozen. Okay, so. I just wanted to share this one slide. I'm not always the kind of person who looks back, but I stumbled across the Allura prescription just recently, and I think in so many ways, this is about us going back to the future. And it surprised me to learn that the Allura prescription actually surfaced it was actually done in 1976, and they envisioned what the year 1995 would look like. And it was really quite interesting that their main recommendation was that recreation, we should shift from being providers of services to becoming community developers, facilitators and enablers of recreation. That was the vision, that was the direction that was established in 1976 as what they envisioned for 1995. And look at those insightful predictions. Those are things that we should be thinking about right now in terms of what we need post-COVID, during pandemics. It's all about this. It's really about joint planning and indirect provision of services and working interdisciplinary and really understanding recreation as a meaningful activity. I think there's something there. And I think in recreation, for some reason, we tend to keep looking, we forget what we've done in the past. And I think there's richness there. So what do we do now? What does that, and how does that inform us for what we need to do now? Well, we've got 5 strategies. We're going to cover them each briefly, and there may be opportunities to go a bit deeper with your questions, but we're talking about maximizing leadership growth, never forgetting your why, utilizing strategic foresight, prioritizing citizen engagement, and being driven by vision and values. So we're going to talk first about maximum leadership growth. And I want to start with this story from a young woman that I met. First I'll tell you a bit about what Dr. Peter Bishop says about leadership, because he's a futurist that I'm working with a lot these days. He's really shaped my understanding of foresight. But what he has said and says repeatedly is that leadership, it's not about a title. So when we talk about leadership, it's not about the title that you hold. As he puts it, leadership is a voluntary position. That when you get a title, it really just gives you more authorityship. So instead, we really need to think about leadership as being a behavior. And maybe we can't change the world, but we can change our corner of the world. So we really need to promote this, thinking that everyone is a leader. And that's a little bit different, and I know some people struggle with that, because as you'll see from the next slide, a lot of times what I saw, like when I was working with people, the greatest leadership I saw sometimes wasn't about a title at all. And when I moved from Niagara College and I went to work with Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, it was for an initiative called ACE Communities, Active, Creative, Engaged Communities. One of the first communities that I worked with, our team worked with, was in very north part of the province of Alberta. And I met this young woman who really didn't necessarily see herself as a leader. And I find sometimes, young people or people from different cultures, women, but a lot of times don't see themselves as a leader. And this young woman didn't either. But it was so clear to us when we were working that she was a leader. She walked down Main Street. Everyone knew her. She knew them. She knew she had her finger on the pulse of the community. But she was also frustrated. She was frustrated in part because her town council was making decisions that weren't really promoting active living. And she was especially annoyed because town council overruled their own bylaw and allowed new development to happen without building sidewalks. And she said, how can you be active if you don't have a place to walk, if you don't have sidewalks? How can you get to know your neighbors? And so she said, I might as well run for council myself. And and what we did, and I think this is something we all need to get better at, is when you see that kind of opening, when you see that kind of leadership, you need to step in and support it. And so what we did, two of us on the team said, well, why don't you? Why don't you run for council? And for some reason that resonated with her, and she did end up running for council. And what's exciting about this is that she ran on a platform of quality of life and active living, and she was elected. Her first foray into politics, she was elected. She not only was elected, she got more votes than any other councillor in the history of the town. And we found out later that she got more votes than the mayor. So that's really exciting, but it really shows that we have to help people think of themselves as a leader. So that's one thing that we can all do. So on the next slide, what we're talking about is, what does that mean to be a future ready leader? And this young woman was definitely that. She was someone who really wasn't content to accept things as they were. She was willing to invest energy in developing a better alternative. And one of the things that is important to understand is that sometimes we need to take things off our plate. We've got a lot going on. So sometimes we need to step back and really take some things off of our plate. But one of the other things that this young woman did is that she also really understood her community as a system. She was really looking at and applying strategic foresight, and clearly she was a community builder. So community-led development was important for her. Okay, MJ, thank you. Wow, glad you're here because I'm not able to advance these, so thank you. So what future ready leaders, if you're really not sure you want to invest any time in thinking about the future, then here's some reasons why you might want to rethink that. Because really, future ready leaders mean that you increase your ability to provide responsive and meaningful programs and products and services and initiatives. It provides opportunities for you to be more innovative. It increases your credibility, gives you less chance of burnout, and it really just gives you more capacity to make a difference. And I don't know about you, but that's what attracted me to recreation in the first place, was that what I saw it as was an opportunity to make a difference. So that's what I wanted to share in terms of thinking about leadership. Oh, no, so I guess I have a little bit more to share here. Sorry, sorry, MJ. What I really wanted to say about leadership was that why, if we could just go back one slide, MJ, thank you. Whoop, no, forward. And one more forward. Okay, so the question that I wanted to put out there was really, why a different kind of leadership? And if we look at the text that is going to suddenly magically appear right there, the world, and you know this, the world is changing at an incredible pace. It's about information and technological changes. And the result for all of us, it's important to understand that this is happening globally. It's what the futurists refer to as VUCA. And VUCA is an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's where we're at right now. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I find that a little bit reassuring to know that I'm not the only one that's feeling that way. So as our environment is changing, it means we have a need for different skills, for new skills, for different knowledge, for different attitudes. And it's really clear, and certainly from my view of what's happening, successful leaders with or without a title, they are the ones who've mastered the basics of change, how to anticipate it, how to manage it, and how to do that within this very messy environment that we're living in. So if we're going to shape our future toward better outcomes, we've got to pay attention to the future, and we'll have to work together to create the change that we want in our communities and in our organizations, rather than allow others to do it. And really, they could be heading us in a direction. We're seeing a lot of this politically, where they're creating change that they deem as important, and it might not be what we want. So when we look at the next slide, this is really, this may seem simple to you, but this has taken, I gotta tell you, this has taken a long time, and I'm so grateful to have been a part of recreation, because this is where so many of these learnings came from. But what is really clear now is that to ensure you are a future-focused leadership, and I know some of you are doing this already, this is really the picture of everything that is needed. And so it really means that we all need to get better at being systems thinkers. We are, a lot of us already serving as community developers, community builders, so that's important. But also this strategic foresight piece is what I think many of us have been missing. So when you, if we look at the next slide, one of the things that was interesting, this really came about as a collaboration between myself and Dr. Peter Bishop. And when we looked at these three components, I had originally shown the pie as having three equal pieces, you know, the systems thinking, the strategic foresight, and the community-led development. And what was really interesting to me is that the futurist is the one who said that it's, no, community-led development, that's bigger, that's more important. It's 60%, systems thinking is 20, and foresight is 20. So the work that we do in recreation, we are so well positioned to be the futurists. So why community-led development? Well, you know this. This is where this is where I've been planted for a lot of years. And for me, the community-led development really was a way to build the trusted relationships and sense of belonging that we need if we were going to affect any change and growth. So we also know that we can't do, if we don't use a community-led approach, we're not going to be put cross-sectoral processes into place. We also need community-led development for what the futurists are calling mesh work, because the future is going to be local, and it's about all of us working together and being nimble and responsive and entrepreneurial. So it's that plus the citizen engagement that's going to be critical. So the systems thinking is really, and I know I find a lot of recreation practitioners are ahead of the pack in that they are already thinking about their communities as systems, but this provides a framework for understanding the whole and seeing the interconnections. And a lot of our complicated issues really need us to look at the broader system, locally and globally as well. And that's how we're going to get to new ways of thinking and creativity and more innovation. So the third area is around foresight. And why is that important? Well, I think that my greatest learning in working with a network of futurists actually from around the world now, what they've taught me more than anything is that it helps us to see that change comes from both an inbound and an outbound way. So what that means is that there's change that's coming at us that we need to better understand, but we can also influence and increase our readiness for change. So that's more, you know, so we can really better understand future by looking at inbound and outbound change. And that, you know, we can influence what the future is going to be. And I think that's what I really wanted to emphasize there. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to need in terms of this new leadership comes from a core set of competencies, and a lot of this you will get from what the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association is already offering through their professional development, albeit a lot of this is really focused on recreation specific. And what I really want to suggest is that there's additional competencies that we need to consider as well. And so if you take a look at that next slide, and MJ, there's actually a number of them, and if you if you can just get all of them, there you go, all of them on the screen. Perfect. Okay. And there's 2 more. So really what we've learned, and part of this, this isn't pure theory. This was a case of us watching leaders like you in their communities to see what was working. And what we saw them doing was really being able to maximize their own leadership assets as well as those of others in their communities. We saw them able to put community-led planning into approach to mobilize cross-sectoral development. We saw them use strategic foresight. We saw them promote systems thinking. We saw them serve as a catalyst for change. We saw them, the most impactful leaders were those who did prioritize citizen responsibility. One of my mentors is in recreation over the years was Dr. Ken Ballmer, and I remember one of the things that he said. One of the things that he said was that we teach people that they have rights, and he said what we need to get better at is teaching them that with those rights come responsibilities. So again, but things are too complicated for us to solve on our own. We've got to engage others. We have to see them as allies. And together, all of this ultimately is about advocating for balanced development. I think we've all seen too many decisions really based on economic development. Not that that's not important, but we have to ensure a balance between community, environmental, and economic development. And in a lot of cases, what I saw was that if the quality of life in a community was strong, the economic development came. So there is this relationship that's becoming increasingly important. So next slide. So that's really what I wanted to say about being future ready and maximizing leadership growth. But what I want to encourage you to do is at this point, think about any questions that you might have and put them into the Q&A pod so that when we get to the end, we'll be able to address them. Well, I'm going to try to allow as much time as I can to do that. So the second thing that I want to stress, and I have to tell you, as you'll see on the next slide, one of the things that I think, this is probably the most important thing I think I've learned as a leader, is to never forget your why. So go to the next slide, but as you do so, channel your inner 2-year-old, because in many ways, this is what this is about, because we always used to ask why, and a lot of times we stopped doing that. But this whole idea of beginning with the why and never forgetting your why has become more mainstream in recent years. Recreation was ahead of this curve for sure, but people like Simon Sinek and others really promoted. Simon Sinek did this amazing TED Talk and a book called The Golden Circle. And ultimately what he said is that, a conventional or a traditional leader used to always start with what and how. And I think a lot of times we do that. We decide what programs to run or what the facility is going to look like and how we're going to put that into place before we think about the why. And I'm not saying everybody does that, but I know I was guilty of it too. And instead what people like Simon Sinek are saying is that we need, if we're going to be innovative and inclusive, we first have to begin with the why. So instead of moving from the blue ring to the orange to the gold, which is what typically we have done in many cases, we're suggesting, and this came from Stephen Covey as well, and said what they're all saying in essence is start with the why. Start with your why, and the how and the what becomes so much easier. So on the next slide, you'll also see a graphic that was inspired by Bernadette Jiwa, who talks about the fact that too often we focus on the cookie of the fortune cookie rather than the fortune. So we do that a lot of times in recreation by marketing and promoting and prioritizing our programs and our special events and our sport leagues and our tournaments and our services and our fitness and our facilities. I'm not saying we all do that, but a lot of times that's what we have focused on. And instead, what she and others are saying is that we need to really emphasize our fortune, our benefits, because that's what really moves people to buy in and to support us as a profession. So our fortune really are our benefits. our individual, our community, and our environmental well-being, what we contribute to that. So on the next slide, what you'll see is that we've done this, and it's astounding to me how ahead of the curve we were. And this is really the result of the leaders within recreation over the years. But we actually started to articulate our benefits, our fortune, our outcomes in 1992. And I don't know, I bet you somewhere in your office, you probably have a copy of this one. It's called The Benefits of Parks and Recreation. It was updated in 1997. And all of that research was then crafted around 8 key marketing messages. This is our why. And if you look on the next slide, you will also see that each of those marketing messages came from 51 specific benefits or outcomes that the research has proven can be delivered by recreation, parks, arts and culture, sport, heritage, that broad, big umbrella of recreation and parks. This is our why, and this is what we should be using to position recreation all of the time. And on the next slide, you can see that what we ended up doing is it really helped a lot of us shift to thinking about the fact that we should be marketing recreation, should be selling recreation as about being solutions. And I remember a number of years ago, a gentleman from public health actually told me that he was rather envious of the fact that I was working in recreation. And I asked him why, because I was a bit puzzled by that. And he said, well, you work in recreation. He said, we work in health. He said, we're running around catching all the drips from a leaky faucet. And he said, in recreation, what you can do, you can stop the faucet from leaking in the first place. And I thought, what a powerful message that is. We know what our benefits are. We had them in printed catalogs. It's been moved online. So we do understand that. So on the next slide, what you'll see, this is a tool that we're making available for you. This was developed by my colleague, Carol Peterson in Alberta. And she just uses this to brainstorm with staff and citizens and volunteers who really, she wants to get them to think about why recreation is important. So it's just a brainstorming tool that works very well. And next slide. So I've also, the benefits that I mentioned, those 51 benefits are now online, and they're going to be moved to the bench as well. They were hosted by the Leisure Information Network and then by Alberta Recreation Parks Association, so they're still available on benefitshub.ca. Yes, sorry, whoa, I'm talking too fast. So, but I'm also, in addition to those 51 benefits, those outcomes, I've also been inspired over the years by the work of John Compton, and he really has carved that. If you look at that slide, what he's really carved it back down to are the reasons why, what he has seen in his research in Texas. This is really why people do participate in recreation. So again, it's a useful resource. Okay. Next slide would be good. So never forgetting your why, that's really about our outcomes and our benefits. And if you have any questions about that, and again, all of this is on slide, so you can keep referring to it post-webinar. So any questions about that, you can post them into the Q&A. So I want to talk about foresight, and if we can just go back, yeah, we're going to talk about utilizing strategic foresight. And I want to begin by just acknowledging and summarizing how complicated things are right now. And it's complicated for reasons, but just I think knowing this might be a bit reassuring to know that we're undergoing so much churning and changing right now. Leadership is changing from the hierarchical leadership that we used in the industrial era to be more distributed, to have many centers of power. We're moving from one outcome to we're needing to deliver many outcomes. It's not top-down power as much anymore as it is bottom-up, middle-out, and top-down. It's not just within our silo. We can't just be about recreation anymore. We have to work within our and across silos. It can't just be paid staff or professionals. We have to engage all of our stakeholders. We can't just be cautious at this time. This is not a time to think short term and to be reactive. This is about thinking longer term, being ambitious and being proactive, and really thinking about the future. That's what's going to be essential. Okay, all right, so next slide. So in recreation specifically, and this information came from the Pathways to Wellbeing, the National Recreation Strategy, but in there they acknowledged, and it's so true that these are all the trends that are happening. And if we could just go back one slide, these, and you're already seeing the impact of this, but this is not new. But this is also why recreation and leisure is being impacted by demographic changes and challenges to health and economic inequities and new technology and all of this. So that's a whole set of factors that it's impacting us. And what we're seeing now are different trends that are surfacing. And I've tried to summarize these on the next slide. And a lot of this was interesting to me because this is the result of work that was contracted by Alberta Recreation and Parks Association almost, I think 8 or 9 years ago, by Ken Balmer and Brenda Clark. And these are what they identified as being recreation trends. And Ken especially has always been known for being ahead of his time. And I looked at this publication, Rethinking Leisure, and thought, man, he was just right on the money with this, because this is really what we're seeing now as trends. You know, more informal, more self-scheduled, more smaller groups, self-directed, more holistic, more family-oriented, more experiential learning, more about, look at home and outdoor focus, environmentally friendly, shorter term and family volunteering. So it's all there. And more partnering. That's what's really important. So if we know that those are trends, and these are all documented trends, and that's what's important to understand about trends, is that they are really telling us about what has already happened that we can document. So we need to pay attention to what people are attracted to right now. So I have a whole series of slides that we're going to move through really quickly to give you an idea. The first one is about bikes for hire. And this particular one is, people are out, it's something that they can do right now, and it's inexpensive and it's keeping people active. There's formal programs like this one in a larger urban center, but I have seen smaller ones, even in a really small community like Calling Lake in Alberta, who did a do-it-yourself one. So that's one example. The next example is really understanding that if people want to do things that are on their own, our role might be helping to introduce them to new activities, like teaching them to fly fish if they've never done it before. They're going to need some assistance with that. Introducing them to things like kite flying. This is from the City of Brampton Kite Festival, and it's so much fun and really attractive to a broad demographic. The next slide is about, this is actually from my home community, and the reason why I included it, because I think that we really need to involve artists in a lot of ways. This is my neighbor owns Femme de Feu Creations. She actually is a performer, and I can't believe she did this. She did this in partnership with the Welland Museum. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see she actually ran a virtual circus camp, which was, and apparently it was a big success. And among other things, you know, the kids that were involved learned how to juggle. So, I mean, who says we have to have a formal program? We can do things virtually as well. But the artists, I think, are going to be really important in terms of the creativity. Okay, so the next slide is another example. This is again something that's very formal and social. They're not social distancing in these photographs, but this is called plogging. And this comes from Sweden, and this really takes jogging, combining it with cleaning up the environment in a social group. So again, it ticks a lot of those boxes, but again, we just need to pay attention to a trend that's already happening and serve as something of a Sherpa to make these kind of groups, make these kind of connections. So it's a different role for us as recreation practitioners. And again, we've got to be more creative about how we use our parks. And so that slide that just, if you blinked, you might have missed it, but that previous slide, I think if we go back, was just to show you how we can social distance in our parks in creative ways. The other, we're also seeing trends like on the next slide where we're seeing things like disc golf, especially among young people, because it's very informal. You don't need a specific number. You can do it at any time. Same with the walking clubs. This group in the Yukon are an amazing group of seniors and elders who are out all seasons, out walking. And it's the walking poles that really make them safer and more mobile. So again, we can help those things organize. We need to think about informal spaces like a basketball hoop in a downtown alley. Not socially distanced, I get that, but it's just thinking about recreation in a different way. And the next slide is making sure that we're more inclusive by thinking about gender neutral spaces. It's really exciting for me to see in this bottom right-hand corner, this gender neutral room was in an arena, in a very small rural arena, and not especially one that you would consider to be a progressive community. So that was really exciting to see that we are beginning to broaden the umbrella. So those are all examples of trends, but what is important to understand, this was huge for me, and this came from my futurist friends, one of whom was Rick Smyer, who lives in North Carolina. And he said to me, trends are great, Brenda, but he said trends are about things that have already happened. So yeah, they're important, but we need to think about things that could potentially come at us. And he called them weak signals. And I said to him, Rick, why do I have to pay attention to them if they're weak? And he said, because they're starting to emerge and they could have a great impact. And some people call them edge cases. And the example that he gave me, the example most people use as an early signal that very few of us were paying attention to was in 1992, and that was the internet. There wasn't any research to say we needed to think about the internet, but look at how it's changed our world. So we need to think about weak signals or edge cases. But I also love this comment by Alina Huplanon, who said, it's not usually the pioneers or the special groups or the experts that identify these weak signals. It's really the people at the grassroots. It's pioneers or the special groups. It's not the experts. And so when you think about the advantage we have in recreation, we are at the grassroots. We're paying attention to those pioneers and those special groups. And we need to listen to that because there's great clues there for us to pay attention to as futurists. Okay, so next slide. So a lot of you may have heard this already, and if you haven't, I'm sure you will, but it's called Men's Sheds. There's Punch Jackson in Alberta is leading the charge in Alberta. I think Manitoba and Saskatchewan are doing some great things. This started in Australia and New Zealand. Very informal. It's not a structured program. It's an informal place for guys to meet and hang out, fix stuff, and build stuff. And what happens is that when they're holding power tools, for some reason, they're happier talking to one another. And the amazing thing is that they get healthier. So again, a different way of thinking about recreation, but there's no reason why we can't do more to support this. And I know Leduc County has already prompted this. They're trying to get this started, and there's interest in this happening in Leduc County. So Men's Sheds, pay attention to that. The next one I wanted to share is really around social prescribing, because this is so fascinating to me that physicians are now really understanding that we can prescribe social engagement that makes people healthier. So public health is moving into this, and it should be recreation, because we can be the connectors, we can be the Sherpas. When physicians prescribe, we can help make that happen in our community. So it is a form of leisure education, leisure counseling, leisure literacy. That was originally our roots. We need to come back to that as well. Okay, so the next slide is about more partnerships. And again, we just need, one more. This partnership, one more, is really promoting the idea that recreation isn't the exclusive domain of recreation. If we could just go back one more slide. I just wanted to show you that this is where we're partnering. This is in my hometown. And this is where the BIA is actually partnering with businesses. The BIA and businesses are partnering with the local recreation department. And so as you can see, there's a pottery shop that's offering a pottery class. There's a cake decorating class, etc. These are being run by businesses, usually on their own premise, but they're being promoted in the leisure guide. It is absolutely a win-win situation. The municipality gets a lot more activities to offer. The businesses it's building their capacity by generating more business and generating more revenue, more clients. So it's a win-win. So the next slide is really another way of thinking about recreation, and this came about if we can just go back, there we go. This came about as a result of work that I was doing with the Indigenous Sport and Wellness Council. They just changed their name. It's Indigenous Sport and Wellness Ontario. And this was a leadership program that was developed by youth, by Indigenous youth from across the province. And it was brilliant in that they understood that they were not just about sport and recreation. They said we are about many things. We want sport and recreation, yes, but we also want a leadership program that dips into cultural education and health and wellness and careers and creative arts and community activism. And so they taught us the importance of looking at recreation from a holistic point of view and working across sectors. So this is competency-based, but again, it also shows the power and the wisdom of working with youth and really trusting people who live in your communities. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share in terms of strategic foresight. And in terms of citizen engagement, there are many of you I know on this call who are community builders. So if we look at that, I can probably explain the difference between a lot of what's happening in our recreation sector versus what we need to do more of. And so on this next slide, what you'll see is on the left-hand side, and this again, it's really based on a model. On the blue is really about direct service delivery, whereas on the right, it's much more about community development. So these are two strategies that are typically used in recreation settings. The blue side is really about direct service delivery, and the right side is more about community development. There's a huge difference, and there's different skill sets required. But direct service delivery is really based on a needs model. I actually am at the point now where I won't even use the term needs assessment anymore, because this is typically what happens in most sectors is that we look at what we don't have, the glass of water half empty. We look at how can we meet those needs. We're treating people as consumers as opposed to citizens, and we're seeing our programs and outside experts as being the answer. So we're kind of creating this dependency cycle when we only focus on direct service delivery. There are some programs that are much better off when they are delivered using a direct service delivery approach. But we need to do more community development where we focus on the assets, the talents, the gifts, the genius that is already in our communities. And we need to do more to build the connections and the contributions. We need to think about those we serve, not as consumers, but as co-creators and our citizens. And we have to see them as the answers. That's how we're going to get more innovative and ensure more sustainability. We're pulling it in as opposed to pushing it out. That's the difference. Okay. So what this means for us as a recreation leader is, in very simplistic terms, is that our job is to call the meeting. We don't have to have the answers. We just need to call the meeting, and we can do that virtually or face-to-face. Community building is really our recreation. It's our secret sauce, and we're better at it than any other sector. I really truly believe that, because That's what we do. We just need to make sure we know more about how to design a process. Our job is, it's not finding the answers. It's not, we can be part of it, but it's not solving the problem for people with a program or an event. Our job is to design a process that allows all voices to be heard. And to do that, as leaders, we got to be comfortable with not knowing the answers in advance. Very different way of thinking about leadership. Just call the meeting. Call the meeting. That's it. Okay, next. So it doesn't matter. Think big in your communities or your organization in terms of what you do, but you can start small. You can start with a community garden. You can, this one in Hinton, they, just after they made this commitment to a community garden, they, in an inexplicable coincidence, they ended up getting 2 of these huge greenhouses donated. We can do porch concerts. We're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of that. We can help make that happen. And I'm really passionate about repair cafes, and I'm trying to make that happen in my own community, where communities come together and fix things, sewing machines with tools, all kinds of things. I just kind of love that concept. So this is a way to engage your community. It's not so much about a specific program, but it's what they determine as being a priority. Okay, so next slide. And again, I'm just flipping through these. And that's just a list of other ideas, so we can move through that. These are things that communities actually have done. We need to support leaders like Michelle. Michelle is here in the bottom left-hand corner. And this amazing woman managed to lever $10,000. It was provided by a funder donation. She and her small group of volunteers in a town of 300 have levered that $10,000 into $520,000 worth of projects, 12 different projects. Our job is to support the Michelles within our communities. Okay, that's another example for you. I think it's pretty inspiring. Northwest Territory is engaging communities by providing them with seed funding to organize 3 community events. It's a great concept. They're trying to get people active. That's a way to do it. Next slide. Cities like London and many others I know are providing event equipment lending. And I know in the Yukon, one of the things they lend are cross-country skis, but in London's case, they're making available for community groups and neighborhood groups. They're making available tents and tables and giant games and chairs and things that make it easier for communities to gather. And on the next slide, you'll see that they're also, this community in Alberta actually brought a community together to build a park. Now, it was amazing to me that they did this in one day. It was kind of like a barn building bee. What happened is that in one day, they not only built that playground, they built a barbecue area, picnic area, an outdoor volleyball court. They planted flowers and cleaned up the arena, and they did it all in one day. And then they said, what next? And the what next led to economic development. So again, our job is to be the guide on the side, not to do it for them, but they decided this park needed to be cleaned up, and that's what they did. Okay, next slide. And I love this idea of these outdoor movie nights, and we're still seeing this happen even during the pandemic because it's something that you can do and socially distance. And the way that London makes it work is that the neighborhood group picks the park, they pick the date, they bring the movie and the participants and the neighbors, so they're responsible for promoting it, and then the city does the rest. So that's another example. And I'm not saying you should do any of these. I'm just trying to convey the idea that it doesn't have to be a formal program, and we just need to think outside the box a little bit. Okay, next slide. And I love this program by Northwest Territories Recreation Parks Association, because this walk to tuck, it's walk to Tuktoyaktuk. So they're walking the distance in small informal groups. They're walking the virtual distance from Fort Providence to Tuktoyaktuk. I think the name might have a lot to do with the good sell on this one, but they have managed to get groups started in employers and service clubs and in schools and right across the territory. And it's astounding to me that they have actually got 10% of the entire population involved in this. So it's a program of a different kind. They provide a lot of incentives, so but it's a great concept. Okay. The next.
About 1 more minute so we can then go to questions.
Okay, so we can just fast forward to the only other thing that I wanted to target. If you can keep going, there we go. I just wanted to talk about the importance of the vision and values provided by CPRA. And if we can just flip through these pretty quickly, we have a vision and we can't forget that. And so we have a vision and we have values and we have 5 strategic goals. And so one of the best things we can do is sit down and look at this and say, how does this apply to our community? Don't reinvent the wheel. Those are our priorities, and if you keep going, MJ, thank you for that. We can also look at our values and how each of those strategic priorities can be influenced. So this is a worksheet, a template that we provided for you. And on the next slide, I covered some of this briefly in our last webinar. So, and this is, the next 2 slides are things that I just wanted you to have as resources. So these are things that each of us can do on a daily basis, you know, kind of dipping our toe into the water and really thinking about being more of a future focused leader. And the next one is almost a manifesto that I thought you might find inspiring. So clues for a time of turmoil. And that's speed talking for you, because we don't have a lot of time for questions, but and we understand that a lot of people will have to leave. But I'm here to answer any questions that you have, and MJ and Krista are going to help me with that. And I'm going to do my best to answer those questions. And also I'm calling on the rest of you in the chat to help us answer those as well. So there we go.
Great job speeding through. Thank you. I know we always schedule an hour for webinars. We should schedule much more. I know that. But we will do our best to get through some questions. Brenda has agreed that she can hang in for a little bit longer than 1 o'clock if some of you would like to as well. If not, you have to leave right at 1. Then we, as I mentioned at the beginning, will be, we have recorded the webinar, and so you're welcome to come back and hear some of the rest of the answers. What we've done in the past as well is sent the questions to our presenters. They've responded, and then we send those out as well to you once we have all the answers compiled. So I'm just going to start quickly, and Brenda, this might be a you and me question. Somebody was wondering if the new bench program is a good example of systems thinking, strategic foresight, and community-led development. And I would just say we don't necessarily consider the bench a program as such, but rather a communications vehicle to help connect leaders across the country, provide professional development opportunities, and ensure people have access to information, research, to really help them to inform what the why is. We used to have something called the Leisure Information Network. It doesn't exist anymore. The bench is a little bit of a next generation of that. Brenda, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that question.
Yeah, I think the bench is an amazing opportunity for us as a collective. And so I'm talking to all of you to shape it in terms of information and resources that speak more broadly to cross-sectoral initiatives and system thinking and strategic foresight and more about community building. So I think we have a lot on the bench that's specific to recreation. So it's an opportunity. It is an incredible opportunity if we do it right. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. How do you differentiate fads versus trends when trying to listen for weak signals?
Well, you know what? I don't know that I can. It's the collective that can. And I think that, again, that really speaks. I think it's a great question. I don't think we can get embedded in any one activity or trend, because things are going to keep changing. And so that's why we've got to stay in touch with our stakeholders and have different focus groups and really listen to them in terms of what they see as being important. You know, and it's at the grassroots. I remember a guy that owned a sports store that took us to task as a recreation department because we weren't paying attention to skateboarding. And he said, this was years ago, he said, it's infrastructure. It's just as important as a basketball court. You need to pay attention. So I think we just need to pay attention. That's it.
Awesome. What's your thought on recreation positions requiring a business degree versus a recreation degree? Is this the future of recreation?
Oh, wow. Well, that's kind of a sensitive subject, isn't it? At the risk of alienating others, I think if we don't respect recreation as a field and as a profession that has post-secondary education that is specific to our profession, then I don't know that we can expect other people to respect it either. What I do and how I do it has been so shaped by my undergraduate degree in recreation. I minored in business, so I know that but we've got to find a way to really combine that community building side, the business side, but shape it by recreation values.
Awesome. I actually think that is all of the questions. I think you've answered. Wait, oh no, I thought one more was coming in, but somebody did want to tell you a great answer, and also some great thoughts in terms of this being a very timely topic for our sector right now. So if there are some other questions that come in while I'm just wrapping up, like I said, I will make sure that Brenda gets them, and we'll get some answers to you. But perhaps we can just see the last slide, which is really just letting you know about our next webinar. And so CPRA leads, we do a number of webinars each year, generally 4. This year we also did, as I mentioned earlier, 6 webinars related specifically to COVID-19. And we're also working on a gender equity project, so looking at how to engage and retain women and girls in recreational sport. So we are doing 5 webinars over the next year and a half, or I guess 2.5 years actually, sorry. 5 in English, 5 in French. Our next one is coming up on October 15th from noon to 1:30. That is an hour and a half. We have a panel discussion, and it will be focusing on engaging and retaining girls with intersecting identities in recreational sport. We will have the more details coming up very shortly with registration details. So continue to check the CPRA website. We will also have all of that information out on social media as well, and you can see the speakers there. So I hope you can join us for that. And in the meantime, I just wanted to really thank Brenda for her time today, her expertise, and just the collection of information and all of the work she does behind the scenes to really continue to inform and move forward the recreation sector. So I want to thank Brenda. My thanks to MJ for helping out today, and to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'll look forward to seeing you hopefully in October. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.